Hello, 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 hello. Welcome to another collective special. I am Ivan De La Rosa. For those of you who don't know, I'm one of the CC members of the collective organization here on the collective podcast. Today, I'm being joined by wow, geez Louise. I'm not going to cut that out because I was trying to say
Just say Cyan.
how do you pronounce it?
It's a joke.
No, you know what? Here's the thing. This is a great intro because I'm severely dyslexic. So I should have asked you, what is the
It's
first
fine.
word to cyan before cyan?
Yeah, I just saw the name. I was like, oh, I can put it as delusional Cyan. I'm definitely doing
Delusional.
that.
See, my brain was going bananas. I was looking at that and I was like, what the hell does that say? All the letters are like switching around, whatever. And Lobato. Both young comrades from across the pond in Europe. One Cyan from the UK, Lobato from Portugal. So these guys, all right. So their work is very much based in I'm going to say, I think this is appropriate to say, disability justice and rights with a socialist communist twist to it. That's one of the things that in sort of the modern iterations of communism and Marxist Leninism that we are starting to see more and more is a much more strong and I think realistic approach to the liberation of members of the Lepen proletariat who live with quote unquote disabilities. And we keep in mind that, disability comes from sort of this medical model that capitalism instills on people, where people are made disabled because we live in a society where capital and your labor power is what dictates how much of a person you are. If you cannot work and you cannot labor for the proletariat, my fault, for the bourgeois, then you are essentially are nobody. We've gone through most of what we consider modern history, essentially trying to eliminate what we call disabilities from the gene pool. You've seen fascist movements do this. You've seen capitalist movements do this, where because there's this obsession with purity when it comes to these really abhorrent ideologies like Nazism. However, we do know as Marxist Leninists that since the beginning of time, essentially, since humans were humans, we always took care of each other. Some of the first evidence, and that I agree with, of human civilization were humans, tens of thousands of years ago, taking care of people who were physically and one could extrapolate perhaps mentally disabled because they were just people and that was just the right thing to do. But capitalism has sort of gaslit us, as it always does, for us to devalue people and only look at them through the lens of what can they produce for the capitalist. So I think that's enough yapping. I got these two young people here to talk to me and talk to us about the work they do and their perspective of things. So hello, Cyan. Hello, Lobato. What's going on?
Yeah, of course. Would you like to start, Lobato? Or
No, I mean, just before starting, honestly, first of all, hello to everybody watching, or will be watching, anyways. And I mean, very good introduction, I believe, Ivan. I think was a
Oh, thank
really
you.
good
yeah,
introduction to it. Uh,
I'm not
not
bored
not
about
quite
this.
not really simplified. I like it. It was very concise. I think, yeah, really good, honestly.
I
But
made it
yeah,
up on the spot.
Explains the ideas very clearly as well, which is pretty good.
Good.
yeah.
Good.
You want to go ahead, Science? Just so I can introduce us. The stuff we
I
do.
mean, if you want me to, sure.
Yep.
So we are members of a organization we have created called the Autistic Union. Basically, we are a communist organization which strives to liberate autistic people by organizing in everywhere, basically through international projects. We have meetings every Saturdays that
Yeah.
leads to the liberation of autistic people. We will try to do it basically from a communist lens, because for a long time in the period of history, autistic liberation hasn't really been a thing, and the time it was a thing is sort of like this idea, oh, the neurodiversity movement, it was sort of fetishized. You saw this a lot in I think in movies and media. There was this big time was oh, autism's not a disability, it's a superpower, which came from
Yeah.
the early World War II era, because Hans Asperger, Asperger syndrome, Asperger's supremacy, etc.,
Yeah. I
which I will
saw that.
touch on later. But because of that, a lot of autistic people that did need help or wanted to liberate themselves had to either do it themselves or like just suffer basically. And what happened basically in like the lockdown of 2020 is, this is like I think Robert Chapman talked about this as well in Last Horizon, but basically a lot of like autistic groups start to form, like r/autistic pride and that, and
For
basically
example, on Reddit, yeah.
the predecessors of that, because r/autistic pride was basically liberal and everything but name. So we are basically the communist variant of that. Do you agree, Lobato, or do you think I left out any?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Oh, I think we're having a little bit of audio problems from your end. Sorry.
No, I think you were just a little loud on that, but go ahead.
All right. Well, I think very much so. Yeah, we're like, I mean, really great introduction, I think. So, I mean, yes, like Science said, we are a communist group. I guess more like a revolutionary left sort of position. We have a lot of anarchists, MLs, MLMs.
Yeah,
I mean, we have a
we don't discriminate
big,
on like tendency.
absolutely, we have a big collection of various positions on the revolutionary left, and it has been so far quite the harmonious sort of project, which is interesting when you consider that sort of let's call it a melting pot of ideology or tradition, if you will.
Yeah, exactly.
Absolutely.
Mhm.
I mean, Cyan being an autonomous, for example, and I'm being more of a sort of from an ML tradition, I one could say.
Yeah.
Yeah, and
Um,
I'm the dirty tanky, so I got it. Yeah, yeah.
Who
we
shall not be named?
we have all been called tankies at some point, at least me and Cyan,
Oh,
especially from
Yeah,
libertarian socialist types in the
yeah.
movements, I say.
AKA
for sure, for
Hitlerites.
sure. Yeah,
A lot of Hitlerites, a lot of Hitlerites. But very much so. Yeah, I mean, I agree very much so. I mean, work sort of like work wise, what we do is, for once, we basically started out as being this sort of a communitarian space for, autistic socialists, communists, anarchists. We basically started out from Reddit. We had a Discord server prior to that, but it was very much small. It wasn't really public. Wasn't really a thing.
It was
And
more of like a private thing, and then I joined later on, and then
yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah, I mean, if we want to be the specifics, the movement was kind of created along around August of last year. That's which would be August 2023. But it's really been much more of a. It has really kicked off this January after I created the subreddit, which is the Autistic Union.
yeah,
It
Oh, okay.
has created
I'll
very
make sure.
much.
I'll make sure to follow you guys. Yeah.
Yeah, very much so. We created a niche on sort of like the Reddit space for the liberation of ND people, specifically autistic people, from the Marxist perspective.
Yeah.
So
Now, how does that go? How does that go on Reddit? Because
yeah.
I personally had to leave Reddit when when Russia invaded Ukraine, because just the amount of
insane liberal takes,
liberalism
right?
that was going on, I was just like, you know what, I'm gonna stop. So I mean,
Yeah.
I'm back now. Like, there is a user, Ivan De La Rosa 1917, on there. I don't really do anything with it, but
Mhm.
yeah, I'll definitely give you a follow for sure.
Oh,
But yeah,
thank
what was that like?
Ooh.
What was that like in general? Organizing on the internet, because obviously this is a new sort of trend that we've
Yeah.
seen,
Yeah.
start in the last,
I think this is gonna be interesting because me and the bot have like very different like takes from this. Because I'm
Okay.
like one of the like first people who ever saw it. Right. I remember feeling very like revolutionary defeatist about like autistic pride, being like, oh, this is terrible. No one's using it. Maybe if it failed, it'd be good. Because then we get a subreddit that actually. And then I saw this like subreddit like r/Autistic Union. Interesting. They have a Discord server. I joined, right?
Yeah.
And ever since I joined, I've been able to understand like
Yeah.
it's been like this great community of people, and like
Good.
Very much
who are
so.
actually communists as well. It doesn't feel like you're just like calling yourself communist for the sake of like oh, I want to liberate people for the sake of it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And like
All right.
what I like about it as well is like there's a very strict policy towards it. So like the moderators are very active on it.
Mhm.
So like it's not just like boom here, boom here.
Yeah, no, we keep it pretty similar on the Collective Discord, like which I'll yeah, I can extend an invite to you guys. But
Yeah.
on the Collective Discord, like we're pretty apparent strict, of who we let in. We want to make sure that people are who they say they are, and etc. It's actually one of the biggest compliments I've gotten, is that our Discord is like very different, because for me, like I'm pretty new to internet organizing. I mean, Collective is only a little over a year old now. So like a lot of things like TikTok trends, Twitter, Discord, I was not familiar with. So like when people would tell me about how horrible Discord was, or I would be like, we have a Discord, people would be like, huh? In the
Yeah,
Discord, and I'm like, "What's wrong?" I had no idea. I really did not know
yeah.
what was going on in those streets. But okay, so yeah, I know. Lumpy kind of asked you a little bit right before you came on. We started recording. So like, how did you guys when did you both start your communist Marxist education? Actually, you know what, let's go farther back than that. What was it like, growing up, as an ND person? you know
Ooh,
how did that synthesize
yeah.
with
This is
your views of
crazy.
socialism, and then how did you guys come together?
Ooh.
You
I think
want to start
perhaps
for me to start
it's such a because to a certain extent I'm still also trying
about?
to rediscover myself in that
Of
sense.
course.
So
Because like yeah,
um
it's like a lot of like masking. There's a lot
Oh
of
yeah.
yeah,
masking
Oh
very
yeah.
much so.
Oh yeah.
Because
like a
here's the
lot of
here's the
like
thing.
holy
Yep.
shit, I'm different to people, but why?
Mm, yeah.
Yeah, it's funny because I just was asked by one of our committee members, like, how do I just like deal with like all this, what the struggles of organizing? And I'm like, oh, it's all masking, dude. Like, I was like,
Yeah.
I was like, outside of this, when
Mm.
the camera turns off, I'm like,
Oh yeah,
um,
very much
yeah,
so,
yeah.
very much so.
But
Oh
yeah,
my
go
god.
go ahead. Whoever wants to start. What
No,
was it like?
sort of. I suppose my experience is different from Cyan's experience very much on the case that Cyan, you I believe Cyan was diagnosed very early on, if I can recall.
Hmm.
If that's all right, Cyan.
Oh,
I'm sorry if that's factual.
yeah,
Um, it's like you were diagnosed at with like 4, right, or something.
yeah. Like, I was diagnosed very young. It wasn't something like I just talked
Oh
about a
man.
lot, but it's like
Mm,
something I knew. I'm like, I'm autistic. What does that mean?
yeah. Yeah,
Yeah.
like so,
Yeah.
like that's different from my experience because I was diagnosed at 14, so it was very much a
10 years
lifelong,
actually.
it was very much a lifelong struggle to understand, why am I perceived differently from everybody? Why does everybody alienate me? Why do I alienate people in that sort of sense? It also comes a lot with self guilt, though I don't think I quite had it to a certain extent. I never went really into a pit of self deprecation or like self defeat. It was very much so
Yeah.
like understanding what's different, not per se wrong, but like different. And
Yeah.
you know, my and sort of like I'm going to get to the political. Sorry, like very much so. I guess the diagnosis, for reference, I basically 2021 we were talking. I had basically a really big meltdown over a thing. I'm not going to go into the details.
That's fine.
And basically, because of that meltdown, I ended up my sister, my older sister, basically ended up seeing a lot of signs of autism, which I wasn't said at the time. Of course, that was very much a thing that she said to my parents. But basically from that, I ended up going to get a diagnosis. So I went to therapy after that, which was I wasn't said exactly what I was going there for. It was very much more like a thing to understand, like my professional orientation in the sense of like, oh, you're gonna what job you want to go for, But it was very
Mm.
much so it was kind of a surprise when like at the last like like therapy session I went, they were
Mhm.
like the my first therapist said, oh, I'm gonna say a lot of things. You probably won't really assimilate them very well, and she was right. And she was like, okay, so my parent, your parents came here and they told, and basically you're here to like basically get diagnosed for autism or like to see if you could have autism, right? And that was very much like oh, I was not expecting that at all because I was completely ignorant on autism up to that point. I didn't know anything about it, and nothing about ND people in general. It was very what I knew was if not if not informational, it was stereotypical, I suppose. So like I was saying, oh, autism, that's like the thing, or like you don't speak or something. And
Mm.
I thought it was like a mental disease at the time. I very much
Yeah.
yeah, very much corrected that myself very quickly on that, and so did everybody around me. But that was that situation, sort of like in all of that, sort of like gave me so much clarity on a lot of things. It was very much the thing about me being knowledgeable in that knowledgeable and stuff. Like I would just be like a like the teacher would be speaking and I'll be like oh yeah and this is like this and this and that, and everybody would be like oh, you're such a teacher, like oh, why do you know so much stuff? And I'll be like, oh, I mean, I just know them, right? It's sort of like like having really narrow interests and stuff like that, or he's just being terribly awkward at a lot of moments. But I mean,
Yeah.
yeah, I mean that, and so like that came from and that was a very turbulent time, honestly. And I also reflected a lot in my political views, which was very much flip flopping at that time. Which goes back
Okay.
to your question. Um, which is sort of like my introduction to Marxism. Um, it didn't come in a very good way, I suppose, because at the time I was in a very reactionary place, fascist, some might say. I mean, not it wasn't it wasn't really fascist in that sense,
Like
but all
pseudo
that pseudo fascist, yeah, it was very much a right winger, like a alt right kind of place, which
There
has
was a
been dealt with.
potential for you to go farther down that route.
Yeah, absolutely.
Mhm.
And especially since you hear a lot about how autistic males specifically, they also have a tendency, because of their social alienation, they very much go and descend in these dark paths. So I'm really grateful that didn't quite develop, because I sort of had the education that I grew up with wasn't very
Mhm.
much the very liberal wise education, was enough to basically keep me away from that. But
Okay.
yeah, all of that to say that basically I flip flopped around ideologically at the time. But I guess my introduction to Marxism very much came from YouTube. It's like we're talking about Hakim, Second Thought, you got like the deprogram guys mostly,
Mhm.
but a lot of people into that mix, which sort of
Mhm.
like allowed me to grow out of that slowly but surely, and
Yeah.
that got me introduced into Marxism, which was basically sort of like
Yeah.
introduction to ML in last year,
Yeah.
basically, which has basically
Yeah.
culminated. And since then,
Yeah.
we can get to that later. But yeah, I think
Mhm.
I've been yapping too much, and Cyan, of course, wants to talk about it.
No, no, no. You're
So
fine. You're
yeah,
fine.
It's cool.
No,
It's cool.
the deprogram for sure inspired Collective a lot. When we were like, what can what's popular right now? What can we do, and then take it farther, like I explained to you guys on Twitter. But yeah, go ahead, Cyan.
Yeah. So this is a very complicated history because like I've always known I've been autistic, but like the only time I was realized like I was different from other people
Mm,
was like when I joined kind of like high school. They didn't send me to like
yeah.
a normal high school. They sent me to like a specialist high school, and
Yeah.
like at that time I was starting to realize like I was like trying to come to the terms of the fact that I was like different from other people.
Yeah.
I was neurodivergent in some sort of way. It was very weird for me because like all this time I was just told don't label it, you're normal, just go on with life, like as if it was just like something normal thing. So I didn't think of it as like, oh, I'm autistic. What does that mean, So
Yeah.
I went on with my life, and then like I start going into these like online movements. I'm like, okay, this is interesting. I'm
Mhm.
obviously at this time I'm very like libertarian, liberal, like progressive libertarian, like politically like speaking. Like I'm like
Mhm.
all like pro vaccine, like I call it the Tories the Nazis and that. So like just like your
yeah.
average like lefty in the UK, quote unquote.
Yeah.
And then I kind of like grow more, like around my like later years, like 15, 16, like when I'm 14, I start reading like books. So I go to like the library. I'm like, oh, I like this like leftist stuff, I want to get into it more. So I watch a lot of like YouTube and that. I'm like, holy shit, this is amazing. Why does no one talk about this shit more? You know? I'm like at this time I'm like a sock dem, like a dem sock. So like, I'm in high school, I'm like running for student council. I'm like, guys, we can have a bit of socialism and capitalism, like the
Oh my
old
god, I remember that time.
Mhm. Yeah.
yeah. You,
Yeah.
you weren't there, so I don't know how you'd remember that time, but still.
No,
I
neither do
think
I.
they mean for themselves,
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
absolutely.
So I grow on, like, I keep like learning. I have like
Mm.
numerous debates with my parents. Like I'm just like downright arguing with these people, then crying like a champion, and then like the next day
Mhm.
arguing more, And then the
Crying like
more
a
and more I
champion.
learn,
I
I'm
like
like,
that. Yeah.
yeah, I'm like, I need to start reading theory. I should educate myself. I
Yeah.
pick up this
Yeah.
book, right?
Yeah.
It's like
Mm.
Karl Marx Explained, I think it was called,
Mhm.
and it was like a comic book version of Karl Marx, I think.
Mhm.
Like basically explain like how Karl Marx like thought and like his thoughts and theory. Like this makes sense actually. I
This
like this.
guy's cooking. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Right.
And I'm
Right.
like, I'm no longer a sock. I'm a dem sock now. I'm like, okay, okay. I keep
Mhm.
learning,
Do the
keep
old
learning, keep learning.
flipperoo. Yeah.
I watch a lot of left reactionary people, to say the
Mhm.
least.
Mhm.
Then I get out of that embarrassing phase.
Yeah.
Then I watch some more people like
Mhm.
being Ugopnik, all that. I really like
Yeah.
Ugopnik because his way of like explaining things.
Yeah, he's
Um,
definitely my favorite out of them. Yeah.
yes,
Yeah,
Ugopnik is the best.
absolutely. I was just
Yeah.
sorry.
Mm.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely, 100%.
Teenage me though, well, I'm still a teenager, but like younger teenage me, watching like the program for the first time after like all like the bullshit lies I was told about it. It's
Oh
like
my
Yeah.
god.
I'm like fucking like my mind's blown. I'm like, what the hell? Where's this stuff
Mm.
been? You know? So
Yeah.
like I
Yeah.
just podcast stuff. I like start reading more. I'm like, oh,
Yeah.
it's kind of alright.
Yeah.
Watch a bit of Second
It's
Floor.
it's interesting, your guys' perspective, because I'm a little older than you guys. So like for my origins, so you guys understand. So like my parents immigrated from a small country in Central America called Guatemala. Guatemala had a civil war, backed by, it was all different groups. It was a military junta, communists, etc. Everyone was fighting everybody. So they left and they came to the United States, and they had me and my brothers and whatever. And for me, I didn't realize that I had a neurodivergency until pretty much like now. Like maybe like really reconciling it with like last year. Like, of course, growing up, I always made jokes, but I never really started to understand that like I was just really good at masking my entire life. And the reason why was because I grew up with two brothers who had different kind of quote unquote disabilities. My older brother with physical disabilities. My youngest brother was born with cerebral palsy. So my father in particular, who didn't really, he was trying his best, but he would just try to instill in me like, you got to protect your brothers, you're the normal one, you're going to be the one to make the money and da 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 and da da da. But like I wasn't. I just wasn't. I just had to compensate this entire time.
Jeez.
Yeah, and it wasn't until like I went through high school, I went through college. So I didn't come into Marxism until I guess later in life, which is interesting because it seems like younger people are finding it faster, and that's probably because of the resources that you have. Because like when I went to college, so that's like 2015. Um, I was calling myself a communist, but I didn't know what that meant. Like I was just like, oh, memes, kill rich people, that's cool, But like I didn't really get
Yeah,
it.
yeah.
I really didn't get it until COVID when I started going on TikTok, and then even more so when I started to actually start posting on TikTok, and then eventually finding Kollectiv, or being recruited into Kollectiv, and then it really started to flourish from there. But like for me, I had a pretty basic understanding of how disabled people were being treated in society because of my youngest brother, particularly because he's a very intelligent young man, but like I picked up very quickly that normal people were never going to see him as normal. Like he's not going to be able to walk into a apartment complex and get an apartment. Like people are going to be like, "Who's this guy?" You know what I mean? Because of the way he talks or the way that he walks. They're not going to understand that he just thinks like you and I. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
I actually had to deal with my own internal biases towards disabled people when he started texting on the phone, because he has a cerebral palsy. He slurs a lot. So when he started to text me these really sophisticated like expressions of himself, and I would be like, who the hell is this? Like, this is not my kid brother. But I realized that even though I was saying out loud that like, I know he's normal, I know he's just like us, in different ways, I had to contend in that moment that like even myself as his brother never really understood him until he had the ability to express himself, which was through texting.
Like the
You know
actual
what I
like
mean?
platform to express himself.
Yeah, exactly. So I right now, professionally I work in the medical field. I'm a nurse. And I got started in the field working as an aide in like group homes for autistic adults. And I did that for a lot of years. And I saw very quickly, we actually did an episode on this. You guys should check it out. But I saw
Yeah.
very quickly these people who living in these situations, like basically going through life without real human connections. And everyone, from administrations to nurses to everyone would basically be like, oh, well, they're just this way. They're just, these are guys who need a lot of support. These guys have, behavioral issues and etc. And they would, a lot of people be like, well, they're just like this. And I started to realize that like a lot of these guys just needed their life to be built around them and not the other way around. Like, of course, they weren't going to fit in capitalist society because these are people who, can't have a typical job. But like when I would see like a lot of, what would be considered behavioral issues, I started to realize a lot of it was like, because these guys have been sitting in this house for like 3 months and they haven't, done anything, but they can't, maybe some of the barriers these guys have is they can't tell you, I want to go outside, I want to go to the mall or I want to do whatever, like these guys are basically just living sort of like this, as I've always called it, like prison with smiley face. So I saw pretty quickly, sort of the behavioral side of it. And then the medical model side of it were like, these guys were basically being used to make money for non-for-profits, because non-for-profits get a kickback from in America, Medicare, Medicaid, for basically documenting in the state, be like, we're keeping these guys alive, give us money. So I saw the inherent exploitation with these people. Like, I'm going to say it's pretty grim, but like at some point, capitalists realize that they can make money off of disabled people as opposed to just eliminating them. And I saw that pretty clearly, and it was pretty disgusting. So that, of course, carried with me as I began to, learn about Marxism and socialism, etc. So like a whole roundabout way, like I think what started to really crystallize for me about like, am I autistic or, do I have a neurodivergency was as I've gotten older, I've started to experience a lot more tactile discomfort, which I guess I never really had a chance to express or feel when I was younger. So like going into like a Walmart or like a big department store like sucks. Like, it's so bright and loud and uncomfortable. I remember I had a moment where like I would get TikToks where like it would talk about how like high functioning autistic people wear like headphones all the time, right? Like over the head headphones. And I would be like, that's not me. But then I would realize I wear AirPods even if there's nothing playing in them all the time. And then I bought
Absolutely.
prescription sunglasses and I just started wearing them all the time, to the point where once I was hanging out with somebody and they for hours and like we were indoors and they turned around and looked at me and they were like, do you always wear those? And I forgot that I was wearing them because it just became so much more comfortable to like decrease the stimulation that was going into my brain. You know what I mean? But upon reflection, like as a kid, like, I grew up, family trauma. Yeah. But like, I was always a very angry kid, a very explosive kid. And, the teachers and stuff would always be like, oh, well, he's just got anger problems and da. But like now looking back, I'm like, nah, dude, you were having like straight up meltdowns because your needs weren't being met. You were forced to try to assimilate into a system that was not designed for you. So I was always known as like the angry kid until, much later in life.
Yeah, of course.
I mean, where to begin,
Yeah, finishing off on what I said before, so like I started to like understand more theory, and like once I understood more theory and like found what I really believed in, I started to understand it more, and that's when I started actually like revolutionary organism,
Yeah.
Going back to like what you said about like having like a younger brother that's disabled, I can definitely relate to that because my younger brother, like when I first started, like oh, this is autistic rights movement, I started learning the history of it all and that, like because there's this big trend of like people coming out as autistic in the 2020s. I say it like it's like an old period, but still. So I was like, well, my younger brother's autistic and he's non-verbal, he can't speak, like even if I'm like don't want to identify as autistic or I'm not autistic, I want to help my younger brother at least, you know. And then that's where
Yeah.
I started like receiving the belief, and like I started just believing it to my grave, you know. Like I and this is what brought me to eventually believe in communism.
Right on, right on. I think
Yeah,
it's a fantastic explanation on both of
Yeah.
your parts.
It's
thank you.
very interesting how you, Ivan, and Cyan came to your sort of like realizations about disability, more on sort of like more on a practical sort of like experience, really. Especially, Ivan, you saying you work with autistic adults at some point in your life, right?
Mhm.
If I can, yeah. And like Cyan, of course, with his younger brother, and I suppose himself being on a special needs school at some point, right? I'm not quite sure if that's the correct term, but yeah.
Yeah,
Well,
yeah.
me, I guess myself has been more on based on my experience, but also more on theoretical, sort of like what I went to, sort of like listening over the time. I never really got, I suppose, experience besides my own, in that sense. And I guess that kind of leads into also, I guess, the Autistic Union to a certain extent, because that was the moment where I started actually getting to know all these different people and understanding, sort of like this massive spectrum or multitude of people which had all of these experiences which were very similar to my own in that sense, yeah, but also incredibly different in so many ways. It was truly interesting and enlightening in that sense. Uh,
Yeah,
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 yeah.
for sure. It's just it's wild when you reflect back and you start to realize or remember things that are like, you know what, that explains a lot. Like
Yeah.
for me, one of the things that I live with is OCD. And
mm,
I always thought, kind of like OCD was like on TV, where you got to keep things like a certain way. I didn't realize that, like, of course, it's in the name, obsessive compulsion, but I didn't realize that that could also be in the way that you think. So, like, when I was younger, it definitely was a lot more physical. Like, I have memories. It's funny enough. I just finally talked to my mom about this, but I have memories of like like I'd go to bed and I couldn't go to sleep if I didn't go all the way downstairs to the basement where this big crate of stuffed animals used to be, and I would have to open it and I would have to touch every single one and then close it and then go to bed. If I did not do that, I would not sleep. And no one knew I was doing that. So it was like one day I was just thinking about it and I was like, damn, that, yeah, no, dude, that's some serious OCD behavior. But then as I got older, it became more like obsessive thinking. Like I would have a thought and it would just stay there and stay there and stay there and stay there no matter what. And
Fixations.
then or
Yeah.
conversations, yeah. And then for me, one of the new things I'm reconciling with is understanding like echolalia. Like I didn't
yeah.
know that some of my own behaviors were like um were part of echolalia. So like for example, there's that I don't know how to pronounce the singer's name, so I'm not gonna say it, but there's a song and the line goes I'm dancing at the Pink Pony Club, and like I will just have it in my head all the time. And now that I said that, it's gonna be with me for the next like 2 days. Like I'll
Yeah.
just be walking around to myself going Pink Pony Club or like repeating lines from TV shows or like
Oh my
SpongeBob
god. Yeah.
especially. I had no idea. I thought that I was just like, oh, I'm funny, so I'm just gonna quote SpongeBob to myself alone in this apartment where nobody else can hear me. Like, you know what I mean? But
Yeah.
then I'm thinking about it, I'm
Absolutely.
like, maybe. But anyway, enough about me. So you guys started to reconcile, with your, with the way that you live, and synthesizing it with your communist thought, right? So, like, growing up and recognizing the struggles that you guys had, like, what what does what is autistic liberation? This is probably it's a two-parter question, but you can answer it however you want. So, what does autistic liberation mean, and what does it mean for you? And they could be one and the same, but whoever wants
Mm.
to go first.
Do you
I
want to
think
start with
Cyan
that?
has been.
Sure, I don't mind.
I mean, well, I guess more like. I mean, no. Just I mean, I guess sort of like a very small introduction to it. It's a very uh, it's a vague term so far, which we have mostly coined. I think we are not the first people to use it, but very much the first people
We're
to
like,
utilize it consistently.
I guess you could say a modernizer of it, like a,
Okay. Okay.
you
In a sense,
know,
yeah. So
essentially.
like taking up the term and sort of like making it our own in that sense.
Yeah,
But there's many different conceptualizations of it. We haven't ourselves made it a doctrine itself out of it. We haven't really we have theorized about it, but not formalize it, if that makes sense, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So very much so, we are still, me and Cyan, all the other people at the Autistic Union, all of ourselves, independently and collectively, are theorizing it almost on a daily basis, even while just talking about random stuff. I guess it really depends. So like different thoughts. So I guess Cyan, you could start with like your conceptualization of it, because I think my own is different from yours.
Well, for
Yeah.
me personally, what it means to me and what it is like theory and praxis. Like reading is a form of praxis, right? But it's
Yeah.
not like a praxis in the sense of doing stuff, right? So to me, autistic liberation is, understanding the class struggle within communism, and like understanding like how things work within communism, and like understanding how to liberate ourselves. So, for example, like the fact that the proletariat must be liberated means the fact that the autistic people must be liberated. I know it wouldn't happen under social democracy, liberalism, or any sort of fascism. We might get recessions, but it will only hold autistic people back.
Yeah.
And what
Well,
I
when it,
realized this
mhm.
disconnect between like are you able to work and are you able to do it? And I think you see
Yeah.
that in a lot of like
Yeah.
neurodivergent movements lately. It's not
Mhm.
to do with like, oh, are they going to be able to liberate themselves? It's more, oh, autistic people can work too, so we can exploit them.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. One of the things that I've trying to be content with and talk about lately is the changes in revolutionary struggle today versus there were even 50 years ago. And I think starting from the Bolshevik Revolution all the way to the Cuban Revolution, Chinese, whatever, is that a lot of these revolutions were predicated off the liberation of nations or the liberations of particular groups of people within those nations, right?
Yeah.
And now the world has become so small. And not only has the world become so small, interconnected, but now we're facing global catastrophe. We are facing the prospect of human annihilation. So revolutionary struggle has kind of changed where I starting to see where the conversation is now moving less away from or more towards not just the liberation of our peoples, our race, our people who live like us, etc., but revolution of the entirety of the human condition. And I don't think that is something that necessarily a lot of communists have contended with, because yes, we're talking about economic liberation. Yes, we're talking about freedom of freedom from racial oppression, freedom from discrimination, things like that. But we're also talking about, when we talk about revolution, we're talking about the revolution of the human psyche. How do we build a completely new society that is departed from the way that we've been forced to live in this world as humans? And that coincides, I think, directly with what you guys are saying, because being autistic or being disabled really is only a thing in the sense that you, again, are different or not accustomed to living in the society that we are forced to live in today. Not just like physically through through the material conditions, but through psychic conditions, through what is happening mentally, how people perceive you, how people interact with you, what they expect from you, instead of just being like, oh, here's Ivan, Lobato, and Cyan, three neurodivergent people, instead of being like they're just three different people who have three different experiences,
Yeah.
who have three different perspectives, and each of them, just like any human, has a requirement of different needs and supports. But because of the society we live in today, because of the way the human psyche is forced to be because of capitalism, we're sort of we're categorized in that way. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, that
It's
makes sense to me.
very much so. I think it ties to psychoanalysis in that sense, because so
Yeah.
the psychiatric institution, and based off a lot of by psychoanalysis, has sort of had this conceptualization of mental illness, and I put that under many brackets, and especially mental disorders such as autism, schizophrenia, ADHD also. But when it comes to what and the pattern that you see around with this is very much so the need to put a label on something. So the fault can never be of the system. It can never be the fault of the
Yes.
conditions on the person. It's very much this very hard idealistic lens on it. It it sort of imposes that the individual, that the fault is of the individual, it's of his condition. Oh, terrible,
Yeah,
be
it's his
you know,
fault for not doing
yeah,
this. It's his fault for not
his
getting
yeah.
like
No,
benefits.
our fault is not of being victims of the capitalist mode of production, of being victims of all of its consequences, of our material conditions, of our class relations. No, it can never be that. In like in the it will always go back to oh, you're autistic, you're just our slur, you're always going to be this, that it's your own
You're just
fault,
like doubted, basically. I mean,
absolutely. I mean,
I feel like there's like some sort of like part to it, because of the
oh yeah,
idealization of like especially within like the Cold War era of like the independent man, like the focus on small business and the focus on like being independent, not needing the government to give you handouts, and like I
yeah,
think this comes across like as well with like the social democratic system, which is like obviously similar to it, but it presents itself differently, instead of going, oh, these autistic people, we need to liberate them. They're like going, oh, we understand the problems and we're going to make a profit out of it. And like you said before
absolutely,
about like psychiatry before and like happy prisons, like you said before, I think that's just to do because they see it as a product, as like
Yeah,
something to,
commodity. Yeah.
yeah,
especially like with like countries with more welfare, like you know, let's say Canada or Sweden, where like it's like, well, you're autistic, well, you can kill yourself, that's what we can really give you,
Damn.
yeah,
Yeah.
It's truth
Yeah.
though, really,
No, I
Well,
know, but it's just
very
like
much so.
shit.
well,
It
yeah,
is
yeah.
it is depressing when you get into especially the euthanasia program with Canada, essentially how they incentivize
Yeah.
autistic people to
Especially like the history of it all
euthanasia.
as well.
Oh yeah,
Like
yeah,
it's all within like hey, we don't have
Yeah.
this
Well,
to fix you. We're not going to fix the
the,
system though, because
mhm,
that would be normal. That would be rational to fix the system.
yeah.
So
Yeah.
instead,
yeah,
we're going to want you to kill your own children.
Yeah.
absolutely.
The we have to cure autism to Nazi pipeline is a real thing, which
Yeah, yeah.
we'll touch on
Obviously,
here.
because it
I
came
have it
from like
in
the
the
actual
notes.
positive eugenics. Like it started from the
Yeah.
positive eugenics movement.
Very much
Yeah.
so.
So I have on here, let me I'm gonna flip this question a little bit here. So I think it goes without saying what our opinions are, but what do you think about the Puzzle Piece Champions, the Autism Speaks
Ah.
organization?
I, I think when it comes to the biggest autism speaks greatest anti sort of like warriors in the sense of going against them. I think Cyan very much has had the biggest experience when it comes to this. I to a lesser extent.
The
So
biggest,
what do you
I've
think,
not
Cyan?
really spoke. I don't know really my experience with it, but like I have like had experience in like boycotting them. Like
Yeah.
for
Yeah.
example, like I know like a lot about the history of them and like how fucked it is. Like they literally started out like as a basic bourgeois movement to stop like autistic people. I think has to do a lot with like how like altruism or charity nowadays. Basically, it's just another like thing to like put bourgeois rights for like the actual person. So instead of it being like, oh, here's what you can do to liberate yourself, it's like here's how you can stand in properly, And this starts off
Yeah.
with like the JRC, which was like a big thing they funded, the Judge Rottenberg Center. They funded this
Yeah.
institute for like autistic people, like example, happy prisons or what you want to call it,
Mm-hmm.
where like they literally put the kids in like a you can see photos of it as well. It's terrible. They put like kids in like electric chairs, shocked them if they didn't say the right response. It just shows you how the capitalist machine works, really. Because we are seen as lesser and like lesser of a being or subhuman. I guess sort of like how you'd see a lumpenprole. Um, we are like seen as like this subhuman. So if we don't act in this exact way, we are seen as like demonized. And
Yeah.
many kids have died from this, And instead
Yeah.
of like, outlawing it, they didn't. Why? Because they're using charity and bourgeois altruism. Well, that's just altruism, isn't it?
Mm.
To like go under the radar and like allow autistic people to be killed. And sure, nowadays it doesn't kill people, but it has a history of it. It's like
Mm.
saying, hey, you wanna like be killed or do you wanna be insulted? Neither. You know?
Yeah. And then there's this fetishization that occurs, right? Because you have situations like at this institute that you're talking about, and we've seen it in New York. We had a very similar place called Wasaic, and
Mm.
Wasaic was like, if you've ever seen Have you ever seen the show American Horror Story?
Yes, I have. I've
Okay,
seen like the
so that the asylum season is high key based off of
yes.
that, because
Oh my god.
Wasaic was this massive institution, and I've worked with survivors from Wasaic. This is very recent, it's only in the 70s. Wasaic was a place where, yeah, they were just throwing people in there, literally like an asylum, and the conditions were just god awful. Just like, I don't need to explain it to you guys. Um, People died there. People were abused, sexually abused, beat to death, starved to death, all kinds of war crimes, essentially. Then when New York discovered, when it came public information, they basically dismantled Passaic, and then they opened up all these little, like I said, prisons with smiley face, these little homes and whatever, and they put people there, but they haven't really addressed the systemic issue, or no, that's not what I'm trying to say. What they haven't, well, they haven't addressed the systemic issue, but the point I'm trying to make is, once it became public, the capitalists have amazing spin teams, and they basically were like, well, since we got caught doing a Holocaust, essentially, let's how can we make money off of this situation? And that's when they started using these people as commodities, using them for either exploitative labor in
And
terms
this even
of
like explains why American Horror Story isn't even a thing, Like, oh, look at this fucked up film. We're gonna make a commodity out of it and sell it.
right, yeah.
Yeah.
No, exactly. Here in America, like, if you're on disability benefits, so the government is giving you money, you cannot have over $2,000 USD in your bank account at any. I think it's like for more than 30 days or something like that. I could be wrong, but there's a time limit, and if you have that and you don't use it, you lose your benefits. So my youngest brother is a great example. So he gets a decent amount of money from the government, and he is also able to work a job, but basically every X amount of time he has to use that money. And to people who don't know, that might sound like, oh, that's great, I can buy clothes and PlayStations and whatever. But if you can't save more than $2,000 at a time, then how are you going to buy a car or
Yeah.
pay rent, or because what rent in the United States is like on average like $1,500 or something like that. So like, if you can't save your money, then you can't live because we live in a capitalist society.
Mhm.
It's really just it's crazy. But anyway, so like, people with disabilities, they live through these conditions. They're becoming commodified, they're becoming more exploited. And just like how we see the same exploitation happen with like migrant workers, minorities of all different types, etc., in the States, we see the same thing with disabled people. We see a fetishization that happens at the same time, where like you I'm sure you guys would agree, like, it's hella cringy when people are like, you're so brave for living the way that you do and you've overcome, you're a warrior. And it's like,
You're a
dude, fuck
warrior,
you. Like,
Go
like,
on,
Absolutely.
person,
yeah.
So
But then you see it happen on media, like, for example, like the Big Bang Theory, or like the Good
Oh yeah.
Doctor, or a House, or something where it's like autistic people are super powered, and it's like, dog, they're just
oh, no, it's
people.
not even
Like,
that. It's like they use that outdated like
Yeah.
bourgeois like
Yeah.
moralist
Yeah.
go
systems like
off.
misogyny and like
Mhm.
sorry, I didn't like
Go
go off,
off.
but, like you hit a spark there because
Mhm.
like stuff like Sheldon and that, right, like they're just fucking arseholes, right, and
Yeah.
like a lot of the time it's like, oh, they're disabled, they're allowed to be arseholes, especially in the House, like it's like literally a house where like he gropes a girl, right, and like the half the arguments are like, oh, he's a bit autistic, so it's fine, like they
Right.
use autism as a shield, right, to make his characters more interesting, because like we're basically just seen as like clowns
Mhm.
in the
Mhm.
capitalist spectrum.
Yeah, well, exactly. Like I said, when I used to work with the guys with behavioral issues, like, we encountered a lot of people like from administration, bigwigs, bourgeois types, who would basically be like, "Well, that's just Timmy," and it's like, that's cool. Timmy popped my arm out of its socket, and Timmy knows what he's doing. And the reason why I know Timmy knows what he's doing is because I've worked with Timmy for 5 fucking years. I've analyzed him. I understand his quirks and his trends. This guy's not stupid. He's autistic. And like, the bourgeois, they never they'll never clarify that because they want people to believe that people with disabilities are, you're just dumb, you're just stupid, you're just X, Y, and Z. But hence why the work that you guys are doing, autistic liberation.
Absolutely.
Go ahead.
Oh no, I didn't have really anything to add, but it has always been interesting, sort of the cultural aspect when it comes to the way that capitalism has a especially American media, though I can say this is very much a global thing, also in terms of American media being global. But it's very interesting how the perceptions of it will always end up going into that sort of stereotypical views of sort of like oh silly oh silly Sheldon, he's just being autistic, nobody knows what goes inside his head, but oh, he's quirky,
Yeah,
it
he's
always
so
sort of always that sort of fetishization,
being
commodification,
misogynistic
which
to women,
me and Cyan have talked about that already in sort of like our podcast, I believe.
Yeah, brilliant for autistic.
We'll get to that at some.
Yeah.
We'll get to that to some point. But yeah,
Mhm.
that was just to add. To continue.
Yeah. No, you're good. You're good. We're just yapping.
Literally.
Yeah.
Yeah. If I was to add one more thing, if that's all right. Sorry, I don't mean to
Of course.
interrupt.
No, go ahead. We'll go on. We'll do like
I just
another
find
another
interesting
20 minutes.
contradiction inside of capitalism. Like,
Oh, I can't
yeah.
hear like Cyan's audio. Like,
Can you guys not hear me?
I can hear you.
Okay, cool.
oh, like for me, it's very like freezy. Sort of like his camera's like glitching a lot.
For me, it's not. So I think it's your internet.
Like I was saying before, I find it like really interesting how similar like our structure is. So we have like general members, right? I might as well just talk about this while he's waiting. And like organizers. So the organizers are like people who are actually organizing IRL and like in real life. So we have general members who just want to talk and chat because the need for communal spaces within like communism and like the proletariat is I think greatly stressed. What do you think?
Yeah, no, for sure. We live in a place that there is no third place. There's no real place for people to meet without the expectation that you spend money. And what do disabled people not have? Money. So
exactly.
like,
especially if you're a communist as well, because like a lot of communists like Karl Marx in that isolate themselves. So like they isolate themselves from like the rest of the proletariat, and it's hard to do like actually organizing in theory. So communal spaces need to be stressed, I think, if you want to get stuff done.
But a lot of people also they just don't have the ability to. This comes from where alienation comes in. So, a lot of people just don't have the ability to be able to have that charisma, to be able to get a group of people together. And do that. All right, hold up. So this is what I'm gonna do. I'm gonna put you down as well, Cyan, so I can say something to Lobato because I feel like there's a lot of cross communication. So I'm gonna put you down real fast. Okay, so Lobato, I'm gonna bring you up, right? If your camera is still glitchy, just turn it off and we'll just do the rest of the show without the camera. So I'm gonna put you up now, one by one.
Yeah,
okay.
It's so
it's still glitchy. So just leave it that way. Can you still hear me?
It's really bad. I can't. It's so
okay.
bad.
So this is what. All right, I'm gonna put you. I'm gonna put you back. No. All right, this is what we're gonna do. Okay. So this is what we're gonna do. So if you just if your internet's being garbo, it is what it is. It's okay. I'm running out of time, so I'm gonna do the last 10 minutes with Cyan. Like it's okay. You can hang out down there. It's fine. When I stop recording, I'll just debrief with both of you guys. It's not your fault. It's just the internet is just being the internet. Okay. So like it's totally cool. Don't forget, remember it's pre-recorded, so all this gets edited out anyway. I'm just gonna put in the thing that's like, well, we had a little technical difficulty. It's fine. It's totally not your fault. Don't feel bad about it. We're cool. So I'll just wrap up the show with Cyan. Okay. So please, stay there, hang out with Lumpy. We're cool. So let me get Cyan up here and we'll figure it out.
Hello.
All right. So Had a little bit of a technical error there. So
Yeah.
I guess the last thing I
Apologies.
kind of want to touch on, because unfortunately I am running out of time, is the term, of Asperger and the connection to Nazism. Can you tell me about that?
Yeah, of course, of course. I'm actually glad you brought this up because like it annoys me when people. I don't really care if someone uses it personally. It's like when like transgender people use like old terms, but like I think when it comes to like actually the history of it, it's like really really tedious because like Hans Asperger, the whole point of it was like he realized that these people, it wasn't like out of heroics like some people like to say, some moralists, but like it was more out of like he knew autistic people could be exploited. He knew it. And like what he understood, right, was like the eugenics within it. Because back in like Nazi Germany, it was called like childhood schizophrenia, I'm pretty sure. And because of that, he was like, okay, here's what I'll do. I'll use Asperger, people with Asperger syndrome as like the workers, basically. Basically, if you were too blah, 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 kind of autistic, killed or like sent to like a camp, because one of the first times eugenics was even used, and like the killing of people inside of like the Nazi Germany was on a disabled child. Basically, like the parents were like avid supporters of like Adolf Hitler's Nazi regime, and they sent the child there, right, and they had it killed.
Wow.
Yeah. So this actually goes over to Asperger syndrome, the idea of Asperger syndrome. It only exists because of capitalist exploitation. There's like a contradiction in it. Like, oh, Asperger syndrome, that's just the autistics that are high functioning, But what is high functioning? Well, high functioning just changes depending on like who you're talking to,
Yeah.
Like for example, in a situation where I've got my needs regulated, I'm high functioning, It doesn't actually mean anything, I think it's sort of the same with like low support needs and high support needs. I think they're more just like liberal ways of saying it nowadays. Like, oh, we can't say Asperger syndrome because of the history now. So they use low support needs or high support needs. But it means the same thing. It's made to divide autistic people and distract them from what the real war is, Like people
Yeah,
say,
for sure.
the gospel.
And even in the podcast, like I've said, like, so levels of support, and
Yeah,
like the thing is like every human being has that. It doesn't matter if you're
exactly.
autistic or disabled.
Yeah.
Everybody has a threshold of needs or supports that are required for them to live a fulfilling life.
100%.
Some people might have some more, particular aspects greater than others. That's not like something that should remove you from like the general population. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I
100%.
remember like I don't remember who made this joke. It was some stand-up thing or whatever, but it was like the guy was making a joke. He was pretty much kind of saying what we're saying. At least I hope so. Because I hope it's not like extra cringe after the fact. But he was basically like, he was like, how many Down syndrome people does it take to screw in a light bulb? And he goes, probably none, because that's not a job suited for them, and we should just have a society where like you would just do that for somebody who has a need for assistance for something for somebody to do. You know what I mean?
Us can screw in a light bulb. They can screw in a light bulb,
No, exactly. Like I get what he's trying to say, but like there's still like,
Yeah. He says it in a very like
miasma of like a discrimination, towards disabled people and the lumpen proletariat, because neurodivergent people with higher functioning or lower functioning, are seen as the bottom of the barrel, and that has again been really gaslit into our societies with the advocation and the proliferation of Nazi idealism, fascism, eugenics, etc.
Oh, 100% agreed. Especially like with the fact that like neoliberalism didn't really get rid of fascism. They just got rid of like one strand of fascism. It still allows some fascism under neoliberalism. It was like, oh, okay, here's what we're gonna do. We're not gonna get rid of all fascism. We're gonna subsume it, take its ideas, and spit it out. And that's exactly what it's done. You can see it like across the globe as well, especially when it comes to autistic people, though, because when it comes to autistic people, there is some like sort of like fetishization. Like especially like in like communities like r/fake disorder cringe, where they're like, oh, I'm the one good autistic that doesn't, like claim my disability. It's to do with like, how can I make myself higher in society? How can I divide myself rather than the
Yeah.
real world, which is, how can the proletariat destroy capitalism?
Yeah, for sure. Makes sense.
What they
Makes a lot of
realize,
sense.
though, what like the capitalists have realized is that it's a big thing, which is why they're making it a trend. You see.
Welcome
Lobato!
back, Lobato.
Okay,
There's my
I'm
comrade
I'm
back.
so sorry. It was
You don't
Opera.
have. Don't be sorry. It's
Yeah,
just. It's how it goes.
the Opera
It's
browser
alright,
was
man.
just
Tech
glitching
issues
it all
happen
out.
all the time. You
I
should
had
know
to,
we're
I,
recording for different autistic.
I had to just join in with the with Google Chrome just to fix it. But yeah, it's
You're
done.
good. You're good. You're good.
So
It's fine because we're basically coming at the end here. Cyan was just sort of explaining the origins, the Asperger's and the name connection with the Nazis and
Absolutely.
such.
Yeah.
You know,
Another big,
just-
I guess, if you want me to wrap this off, another big distinction
Yeah.
is like the rise of popular eugenics in the 1800s. This is actually where a lot of like the old autistic like stereotypes came from, because like they saw new people, and like they were like, well, how does this come from? Well, if we don't
Yeah.
have kids with them because they're beastly or whatever. I think it's the same thing with like you see like a lot of like especially this guy called Slazak on Twitter. I fucking hate you, Slazak.
not Slazak.
Sorry, that was censorship. I have big arguments with him, but even he was like, he's a big liberal on Twitter, but he was like, oh, why can't we have like ways to cure the autism if they choose it, Yeah, but it only goes so clear to if they choose it, to like a point where it's like, oh, let's just do it, Oh, how do you know he chose it? You told me in his sleep, in his dream.
Yeah.
If you got what I mean?
Yeah, right. Yeah,
Absolutely.
I'm just advocating. Right, exactly. Yeah. That's nonsense. All right, guys. So I think we've had a pretty good conversation. Lobato, sorry about the internet connection issue.
Yeah, I'm so sorry. It's on my end.
Oh, he left.
And now we lost him. Hold on, he'll be back.
All right, no problem at all.
He's
I'll
probably
just-
having an internet connection issue.
I'll just take this opportunity. So Cyan, like, what were you guys talking?
See, now you can't be upset because I accidentally kicked myself out.
Yeah.
Like button. So But anyway, yeah, no. So I think we had a really good conversation. Is there anything like I know you have the podcast, but whatever you guys want to plug, your social medias, let's go for it, and send them to me on Twitter so I can put them in the video description.
So yes, I mean, I guess
Sure.
Overall, follow us on Radio Free Autistic. It's our podcast. We talk about autism, and it's very much a cheap copy of the program, but with the touch of autism. I'm kidding, mostly. But very much
description.
Yeah, but joking aside, I highly recommend you guys check out Radio Free Autistic. Right now it's just me and Cyan, but we are on the process of making more of a collective thing for the Autistic Union. So we're gonna see more hosts, more people, and yeah, about that. Yeah, if we're gonna be.
I'm sure you'll get people want to check you out once this goes up.
On Twitter,
check out all,
yeah, so check out our subreddits. It's r/Autistic Union. Be sure to check out our Twitter account, which is kind of inactive, but we'll get back to it. And be sure to also join up with our Discord server. Yeah, I mean, there's lots of fun, and I mean, that's pretty much it. My self-insert, sure. Let me just put my self-insert very quickly. Follow me at Comrade Lobato on Twitter for the bangers for my bangers.
Yeah.
Anything you have anything you want to plug, Cyan? Or
for me, I mean, if you want me to plug something, I'd plug.
It's up to you.
A lot of things,
the
but
floor is yours.
If you want to follow me on Twitter, I'm at Jojo17Villain. If you want to follow my games development stuff, you can find me on GS88 on itch.io. I've changed my name because I've realized the connection to it now. But before I didn't, because I was a stupid kid. But like anything else? I mean, read Workers in Capital. That's a good book. But apart from that,
Let me
Alright, guys,
do
cool,
my own.
cool, cool.
Let me do my own book insert. Read Quotations of Mao Zedong and Empire of Normality by Robert
Okay,
Jackman.
all
Yes,
right,
yes,
all right.
Empire of Normality as well.
All right,
Uh,
gang.
Also,
All right.
Unmasking Autism as well. Great book.
Listen, it's all about
Okay.
autism Maoism. That's my next synthesis.
There you go.
But
There you
I-
go. That's the new. That's the new line. All right.
Wait, I could call myself the autistic autonomist. To be fair, that does kind of like
Mm.
good, like.
cringe.
Yeah.
Uh,
All right. Gonna see y'all
See y'all.
later.